As we celebrate our 75th anniversary in the United States, and less than 100 years since the foundation of the congregation, we realize that the history of the Daughters of St. Paul has only just begun. In comparison with other communities, such as the Poor Clares, which boasts heritages that go back centuries, the Daughters of St. Paul is still living as youth. We can compare the development of the Daughters of St. Paul in the United States to that of a mustard seed, sown by the Spirit in New York City in 1932. Throughout the years, this seed, received by Mother Paula Cordero and the first pioneer sisters who arrived from Italy, has blossomed and developed. It has become a tree extending its branches from coast to coast in the USA and English-speaking Canada. This history brings into focus the special gift of the Pauline charism, which calls women to a new and unique form of evangelization through the means of communication. The founder of the Daughters of St. Paul, James Alberione, was born on April 4, 1884, to poor itinerant farmers in the northern countryside of Italy. He entered the diocesan seminary, and on the night of December 31, 1900, his life changed forever. At the Cathedral of Alba, while kneeling in adoration before the Blessed Sacrament, he was given a magnificent inspiration of God that was to mark the beginning of the Pauline family. Young James was only 16. During his prayer that evening between the two centuries, James Alberione reviewed the needs of the world and the possibilities that lay ahead. He asked himself, "What can I do? How can the gospel be spread?" Within his generous heart, the Lord had fused all these thoughts and desires into a smoldering core, an energy that would develop over the years, becoming a vital new gift for the Church. On a June afternoon, almost 15 years later, God also drew Teresa Merlo into this great adventure of love. She was invited by Father Alberione to lead the feminine Apostles of the Press. With her yes to God's invitation, this new charism took root and blossomed in her heart. Teresa and the first sisters so captured within themselves the spirit of St. Paul that the townspeople could easily identify them as the Apostles' daughters, and thus the name Daughters of St. Paul was born and grew. The place where Teresa Merlo said her first yes in 1915 to collaborate with Father Alberione in the beginning of the Pauline mission holds deep significance for the Daughters of St. Paul. This took place only 1 year after Father Alberione had founded the Society of St. Paul, priests and brothers who would also work to proclaim the gospel through the means of communication. The first house of the Daughters of St. Paul was soon established in Susa, though in great poverty, lacking food, heat, and other necessities. Despite these hard beginnings, the sisters were filled with a spirit of love that made everything an adventure for God. Sister Paula, or Mother Paula, as she was to be affectionately called in later years, was one of our first sisters to sail to the United States from northern Italy in 1932. She secretly had her heart set on going to Brazil, since she knew the language would be easier for her to pick up. But when Mother Tekla asked her to found the congregation in the USA, Sister Paula agreed, and at the age of 24, set out for the USA. Born Adele Cordero in 1908, she grew up in Priolo d'Alba in Italy. Her parents, Stefano and Carolina, reared their 8 children with love, faith, and the discipline characteristic of the period. She attended 3 years of elementary school, where she received the most basic education. On Christmas Eve, 1926, 17-year-old Adele entered the Daughters of St. Paul. 1 year later, she made her first religious profession and received the name Paula. Little did she know then what awaited her in only a few short years. It was on a rainy day in 1932 that Father Burano, one of the first of the Society of St. Paul to come to the United States, stood at the harbor in New York, waiting for the ship to arrive, with what he expected to be another priest from Italy, when 3 young sisters stepped off the ship. In dismay, he told them that they should not have come at that time. With all the trouble he was experiencing, Father Burano had no idea how he would convince church officials to allow Sister Paula and her companions to stay in the United States. Nevertheless, Father Burano brought the 3 sisters to stay with the Baptistine Sisters on Elizabeth Street in downtown New York City. They stayed there for 3 days and then moved to a small wooden house. And so it was that on June 28, 1932, in the midst of the Great Depression, our first sisters arrived and stood on American soil. Speaking only Italian at first, they began by visiting Italian families, parishes, and businesses in New York City, later venturing out into the English-speaking population. Sister Paula, Sister Ignatius, and Sister Anita were unprepared for what they were to face. They had come at the worst possible time, humanly speaking, in American history. The 3 young sisters walked into a nation racked with increasing hardship and despair. The beginning of the decade saw everything falling: employment, wages, industrial output, and not least of all, human spirits. There were long lines at soup kitchens and people sleeping on park benches. Large numbers of the homeless were wandering the city streets, many from other cities in search of relief, only to find more of the same in New York City. There was a great need for the sisters' mission during this period in America. Yet at the beginning, their mission of working in the field of communication was met with misunderstandings and difficulties. People were accustomed to sisters who taught in schools, worked in hospitals, did social work, cared for the disabled, or lived lives of prayer and contemplation. But it was surprising and even outrageous to see sisters devoted exclusively to evangelizing through books and periodicals. However, a sign of hope appeared in October 1934, when the first American vocation entered the small community. Sister Mary Celeste received the religious habit on June 28, 1935. This was followed by the long-awaited and joyous news that Cardinal Hayes had given the community permission to remain in the Archdiocese. In the years to come, New York City was to become known as Mother Paula's first love in the United States. Always generous and ready for work, she was a natural animator, and from the beginning instilled in the sisters a great love for community and for the mission. On September 29, 1949, the aspirants and postulants moved from New York City to Derby-on-the-Lake, as the sisters called their new property, situated on the banks of Lake Erie. On March 31, 1949, the novitiate house was formally erected. On the sisters' property was a 2-story frame house, a glass-covered greenhouse, a stable, a gatehouse, and another summer home right on the property, where the sisters held classes. The greenhouse and the stable became the mission area. Their entire property spanned approximately 12 acres. But when the founder and Mother Tekla later visited Derby, Father Alberione commented, This is no place for you. You are sisters of the city, not of the country." As in the beginnings, the Society of St. Paul was a crucial help to the sisters in their search for a better location. They suggested that the sisters approach Archbishop Cushing of Boston and ask about opening the novitiate there. When Mother Paula met Archbishop Cushing, she told him that the sisters were looking for a place to build their American novitiate and expand their communications mission. At that time, Cushing said, "I'll keep you in mind." Later that year, he came to a decision. "Your mission work is important," he wrote to Mother Paula. "I want it in the Archdiocese. Come." From that time onward, he and Mother Paula became close friends. An unusual sight met commuters at Boston South Station on the morning of June 16, 1956. 35 postulants, novices, and professed sisters of the Daughters of St. Paul spilled out of a train arriving at 9:30 a.m. in Boston, after having traveled the entire night from New York. The community was greeted at Our Lady of the Railways Chapel by native Bostonian Archbishop Richard Cushing. With the Archbishop's invitation, a new phase of development and growth was initiated in the American province. One after another, book centers and convents operated by the Daughters began to open, always in fidelity to Father Alberione and Mother Tekla's inspiration and direction. Archbishop Cushing himself broke ground for the convent in Jamaica Plain on Easter Sunday, 1955. Meanwhile, there was a continual effort to mechanize the printing and bindery area, replacing outmoded manual processes. In 1958, books were still manually collated, and book covers were put on by hand. However, progress was evident in the fact that offset color lithography was added to the letterpress operations in 1958. At the time, there were approximately 15 machines used for printing and binding. At this time, the community of Boston had grown to number 70. 1974 was truly a remarkable year. On the Feast of the Assumption, Cardinal Medeiros laid the cornerstone for the new St. Paul's Book Center on Tremont Street, the third book center in Boston. As he blessed and opened the center, the Cardinal praised the sisters for their success, which took a tremendous amount of work and trust in God. From these small beginnings, the Daughters of St. Paul now operate 18 Pauline book and media centers across the United States and in English-speaking Canada, as well as the Pauline Books and Media Publishing House and Recording Studio in Boston. Daughters of St. Paul work and pray around the world in 54 nations for the spread of the gospel message, in keeping with this same spirit and heritage. The inspiration that Father Alberione received on that night between the two centuries also led to the founding of several other religious congregations and secular institutes, known today as the Pauline family. The mission of the Daughters of St. Paul is to proclaim the gospel through the means of communication. As apostles in the world of communication, we proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ through the witness of our life, prayer, community, and mission. A mission rooted in the Word of God and the Eucharist. For every daughter of St. Paul, prayer and mission go hand in hand. Our prayer life gives us the energy to carry out the mission entrusted to us. In the same way, the needs of the world, encountered through our mission, fuel our prayer. We are not only grateful for your collaboration in this work, but we feel honored that you participate with us in bringing the good news to the people of our time. Today, our mission is necessary and urgent for the Church of God. Every day, we are all called to bring to life a gift of the Spirit that addresses itself to the challenges